Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cookesville, USA, the wildest, wickedest, wealthiest big small town in the West. Video and audio podcast. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So, by this time, everybody listening to the podcast, you've learned that Cookesville, USA is 3 books. We are talking about book 2 for this episode. And let me just say right up at the top, because I think I was remiss, ladies and gentlemen, to say this is probably this is probably the sexiest part of the book, I think, because I just think it's important to let people know, because I think people that read books and listen to audiobooks, I think they're wanting to hear some sexy stuff.
Oh
Would you
yeah,
say?
especially my feeling about book two is it's the real meat of the whole project.
Yeah.
It gets you right into the modern thriller and sexiness portion. The first book, number one, lays the groundwork with a diverse coming together of peoples in the West. I just felt it was essential to weave their stories together so that readers and listeners would understand the diverse nature of the founding of this Central Valley
Mm-hmm.
town
Yeah.
that is based closely, very, very closely on a real town, Bakersfield.
Mm-hmm.
And if you like the Western theme from Santa Fe onward, you were thrilled with book number one. But if you are really into modern thrillers, then crime novels, mysteries that are exciting, book number two is your baby because
Yes.
you meet the protagonist who is undoubtedly the center of the story. He fascinates, he frustrates, he thrills you, he amazes you with his investigative know how.
Yes.
And everything that he pursues, he seems to bring to fruition, whether it's good or bad, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
And
he's
here's
a real person. I knew him. He's a real investigator,
yeah.
a friend
Yeah.
of ours, and
Yeah.
that we socialized with a lot. And that's what's amazing about it, to know a person like that that takes those deep dives into um, not exactly legal actions under the table.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the story. He's at the center of the entire book number two and book number three.
You know, Sarah is absolutely, I'm glad you said something about it being about a real person, because that's what amazes me with your overall book, but book 2 in particular. And it's all about Lyndon Wethers. And you knew Lyndon, right? He is a real person. Um
The name has been changed, of course,
yes, yes,
but
absolutely.
yes,
Yes, yes,
he
to
was
protect the
a
innocent, right?
he was the leading criminal investigator here in Bakersfield, and all of the legal community knew Lyndon Wethers,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. How did you first meet Lyndon? And um, because I really want to get into the book too, but I want to have people understand what made you want to write this portion and add this to your book.
From the beginning, the concept of Cookesville, USA began when I met the real Lyndon Wethers, an investigator in the leading criminal law firm in Bakersfield. From the time that I moved here until the time that I met him, I became immersed in the local scene. You know, I had my children. We joined country clubs and tennis clubs, and I loved the tennis world. And I rubbed shoulders with a lot of the people in this book I met while I was playing tennis. And you see eventually that one of my characters, Helen, becomes a focal point, and she her relationship with a certain doctor is based on that doctor. He was real.
Wow,
He had a
really?
lot of wives. He was a friend of Lynnie's. That yeah, Dr. Christian Williams. Just kind of reverse the names first and last, and you might come up with something close to his name. But you know, I was in awe as a naive young woman with little kids playing tennis, finding out really they
Mm,
did that and that happened, and really I'm witnessing this affair going on, and really when you travel out of town, you all do this, and I was I kind of grew into it and had my fun and enjoyed my game while I'm learning these stories. And then I met Leonard, and he became part of that fabric as well, investigating some of those people.
yeah,
And the crimes that I focus on from the 1940s onward are real crimes in this city and in Las Vegas and the environs all around. So as soon as I met him, I wanted to write the story.
wow,
And knowing that he had been approached by a Hollywood A-lister about getting the bloody boots of Spade Cooley,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
trying to remember him, the real one of the real murders in this book.
yeah.
And I changed the names, but everything else about that crime is exactly as it happened.
How did you decide? Because I think, and obviously this is with anything, to be able to read or now listen to your audiobook, you have a real uh understanding, and you get a concept of like, oh my God, these people are real. This is real. These stories, as we put it, ripped from the headlines, right?
Right.
How did you decide on what to use, um, and where to put it? Does book two run in chronological order, or did you put an event from over here, in the distant future, and put it in the distant past, or was it all in chronological order? Does that make
Most
sense?
of it, yeah, most of it was in chronological order. There was one affair that I moved 2 decades back, and if the tennis community reads it, they might recognize the names are very close to the real names. But I
Hmm.
did that because I was so close to these two people.
Wow.
I was very good friends with both people,
Mm.
having an affair. And so I had to protect them and myself by putting them in a different
Wow.
time zone and giving her husband a different career. So
Oh.
yeah, it's other than that, they all happen chronologically. And since I was already, teaching history for more than a decade at that point, now it's 3 decades. I've been teaching history. Well, I'm approaching my 30th year. I was well versed in California history and U.S. history. And
Mm.
so to understand the migration of people and traditions and cultures from east to west, how it occurred across parallel lines,
Yeah.
then I knew exactly. It explained to me what Bakersfield is all about, and therefore Cookesville should be all about,
Yeah.
because it was founded in 1850, like Cookesville.
Hmm.
The founders of Cookesville have nothing to do with the founders of Bakersfield, but it is a similar story.
Yeah.
It's the modern story that becomes very closely identifiable by the local community. So, yeah, it's like I often say, it's like a Peyton place. When and a recent luncheon, Steve and I met two of my lady friends for lunch, and one of them is a teaches at Bakersfield College. Of course, I teach for two other colleges,
Hmm.
and we were comparing notes, and it came up. Well, yeah, it is a little Peyton place, but it's a big Peyton place. People don't realize it's over 500,000 population. It's not a small town. The perimeter spreads out more and more every single year, and people migrate here because of the affordability of living and availability of jobs.
Yeah.
That's what brings them together, and it just adds continually to that diversity. But It is so unlike a Southern California town or the Bay Area where I used to live.
Hmm.
One town runs together with the next, and you think of the Bay Area as one culture, right?
Right.
You think of Southern California as one culture, especially when you get from Orange County to San Diego. It's a very rich and conservative culture.
Yeah.
Los Angeles is more liberal.
Yeah.
Bakersfield is Bakersfield, and it has a border. I have never lived in a town that was so rich in diversity and yet has this border, and everybody, if you're very active in the community, you start talking and sharing, and you're going, wow, you won't believe this one. Like
Amazing.
Joan Rivers used to say, if you don't have anything good to say about a person, come and sit beside me. You know, and
I
that's
love it.
kind of like Bakersfield. Whether you want to know it or not, you're going to find out. Oh gosh, you're kidding. So
Wow.
by the time I met Leonard and knew, wow, I've got the inside scoop on some illegal law community
Wow.
and how they got it done and whether it was good or bad. And some of it was horrible. Books have been written about that. Mean Justice was written about our 1980s, early 90s district attorney and how he got things done to raise his career up, even though he sent a lot of innocent people to prison uh,
Wow.
in a child ring where they made the children say things about their parents that were untrue.
Wow.
And about 13 different people went to lengthy prison sentences because they wanted to create a story that didn't exist, and they did. So that's mean justice. But when you've lived here for a few decades, you realize that there's so much good the community does for one another, and then there's so much bad, and
Right. Right.
that it is true, as I state in my book, that vigilante justice is very much still alive.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we talked in the previous episode about how you envision how you wanted to tell your story and you actually put it kind of like this discovery, right? In book one, it was all about the discovery of the creation and your characters, and it was such an organic way that you put it together. Book two fast forwards to the 1940s, right? We catch up in the 1940s um and it's like you said, the story revolves heavily. I would think that is like the main character of book two, which is Lenny, his lover, right? His girl, what do you call it? His girlfriend, I guess, with Stella.
Yeah, beginning with her and
Yeah,
moving
yeah, and
on, the
then
guy got around.
yeah, I wasn't gonna use the word, but how is it? Sexcapades
Sexcapade.
is
He had a
is
few of them.
very yes, yes, and and obviously that when you talk about a person and the way that you created Lenny, he is very much a well-rounded character, I think, for a guy, because he's worried, he does his work and then he wants to be with, his lover, right? And there's really nothing else to differ. That's how simple I think men are, right? It's work or playing around, right? And
Right.
and and maybe people watching this, listening to this will be like, you know what? He's right. But that's the way it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and to put it in the most simplest terms, that's Lenny. He is a very um he although he's very cut and he tries to be honest with everybody he sees. It's
Hmm.
just that honesty gets mixed up with his sexcapades and trying to keep from how could we he doesn't want to fall in love. He doesn't want to get married, right?
Yeah. No, he doesn't. Yeah, that's the key right there. He
Yeah.
doesn't want to get married or have children.
Yeah.
He sees the world. He's an investigator. He sees the slimy
Yeah.
underbelly of the criminal world.
Yeah.
And why would he want to bring a child into it?
Yes. Yes.
Now,
Yes.
he could have gone on and on and on with one woman,
Yes.
uh, except something happens, and then he could
Yes.
go on and on and on with this other woman,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
something happens. So that's what the reader has to find out in him. He's very compartmentalized.
Thank you.
I
Yes.
remember
Yes.
trying to explain to one of my professors at Cal State when I came back to school and going through divorce and had three little children. And she had us keep a journal, and she had a private meeting with me and said, "How in the world are you getting through this?" And I said, "Only by compartmentalizing my life. When I come to school, I'm just a student. At night, I'm just a mother helping them with their lessons. And the other part of it is over here, and I try to ignore it as much as possible." So I could understand uh, and that's the way the real Lynnie was when I met him in I don't know, 2005, 6. I'm not sure exactly which year it was that I first saw him, but he was neat as a pin. You never saw him anything other than dressed up, perfect, and the legal community coming by his table and talking to him one by one, and Steve explaining to me who he was, and then pretty soon he's sitting at our table, and pretty soon we're meeting him for lunch all the time. And I was impressed with the fact that he would share these stories, and I would, my mouth is falling open, and he'd say, I'm not proud of everything I've done. I'm not, but he was honest about it.
Yeah.
He would state that easily, and he would say, it's not worth retelling, and I'd say, oh yes, it is.
Mm.
So, then there I was in 2011 at his memorial service and hearing the stories from these people that I'd been watching, mix with him through the years.
Mm.
And, like I said, I've had him over to my house, had a dinner, and once again said, I would like to tell your story. And he wasn't that interested. He was going to let the Hollywood A-lister tell it, though.
Ah,
And then,
yeah.
then he passed away.
Ah,
So I was convinced then in 2011, this has to be told, and I'm going to jump right in there. That's probably why I'm still in this town, because this town has so many stories,
yeah.
so many. Yet, I mean, I just scratched the surface. These were some of the most salacious I've learned of, but I can easily sit here and tell you, just this one and this one and this one. You let an attorney here in town read the book, and they'll say, "Hey, you've got to, did you know about this one? Did you know about that one?" And so they're anxious to share more stories. So I don't know, there may be maybe more coming in the future, but he was definitely an example of compartmentalizing. As I start the book, he's putting himself together to go out on the town, and he walks rapidly and purposefully, and that is just the way the real one
Yeah.
walked,
Yeah.
and looked always. He didn't miss a thing that was going on, and
Mm.
uh, he could he could always tell you a story you had never heard before. So
That, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And to know the book, obviously, and to know what's in store for people to listen to it, it's even more. I mean, you couldn't write it. I mean, people would look at it and be like, "That's not true," but it is.
it
And
is.
and it's always truth is stranger than fiction. And you really get a sense of that when you listen to your book. And again, the way you wrote it, it really it centers and so obviously it starts with Lenny and he's already working a case, but then he goes to Las Vegas, and that's when you really find out that he's kind of got himself into this underbelly of the mob, organized
Mhm.
crime, and the way that you weave in that story is amazing. And did he talk about that as well to you?
He did,
He
yes. He
did.
talked about Bugsy Siegel.
Wow.
Yeah, and Bugsy used to call him Kid. Hey, Kid.
Wow.
He talked to him like a mobster would talk to somebody. But he didn't know that uh, the real Lenny, I almost slip all the time and say his name, but the real Lenny was investigating, you know,
Yeah.
the skimming practices of the mob, which is quite something. And I describe it in detail. And, that's the way it would happen. If you watch Casino, you get a little look
Mm.
at what you're going to see in my book.
Yeah.
If you've
Yeah.
seen the movie with Robert De Niro,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, it's a great movie, but it gives you the the frightening aspect of crossing the mob. And that's what happened to Bugsy.
Yeah.
They didn't think he was cautious with their money.
For people that don't really know who Bugsy Siegel is, he was probably next to Al Capone. Was he one of the most famous mobsters that people kind of know and
Well, yeah, he's been
recognize?
been made famous by Warren Beatty, that's the person I first of all thought, now, if Warren Beatty were 20 years younger or
Yeah.
more, he is Lynnie.
Wow.
He is Lynnie. I mean, Lynnie had that kind of look. And when
Wow.
I went to the memorial service, that's what the women would say when they stood up. He had movie star good looks. Oh yeah, they were
Wow.
all kind of jazzed with him.
Wow.
But he had that. He had sex appeal,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
knew him as just in his 90s man,
Yeah.
in his
Yeah.
90s.
Yeah.
So, but I learned all about it. And yeah, Bugsy Siegel was part of that. They called them the murder company, or I can't remember exactly. I've got all the history of of well, they were the Jewish members of the mob. It was an Italian mob, and they had a hard time being accepted. The Killing Machine Killers. I don't know. I can't bring it to my mind right now. But that's the way they used him and Meyer Lansky. They were good at killing, and they didn't flinch. Some of them had a little bit of heart about that and found it difficulty, but they didn't.
Yeah.
So they became, come on out to Hollywood and spread our machine out there. So they
Hmm.
did. And from Hollywood, when it was the Hollywood elites that began to develop Las Vegas further. And so he became the perfect person because he had no, you know, had no hangups about
Yeah.
murdering anybody out of the way.
Yeah.
So,
And the way you wrote it, obviously, it you almost do, you feel, I mean, as character development, you really feel for Lenny. Sometimes you love him, sometimes you want to jump through the whatever you're listening on, or when you're reading, you really want to jump through the pages and just go, "Come on, man, what is
grab
your
him.
problem? What is your problem?" And I think that's part of the allure and the appeal, the sex appeal, right? And you wrote it. It's right there. Um, you know, it we also talk about obviously the offspring of Frank and Lily, right? Which Sam Cooke, he is the father and son duo of a law firm, right? And we kind of
Right.
meet Sam's father, and but throughout the second book, you get to meet Sam and his family, his wife and his kids, which when we start talking about book three in our next episode, really you see that character development through not just Lenny and Stella and another love interest, which is Ruth
Yeah.
for for Lenny. But you really get an affinity for these characters that you knew and that you put on paper. Now, was there really, since we're talking about real people, was there a real Sam Cooke?
No,
Oh,
no.
oh my
The
God,
see, yeah, no.
Sarah, I don't want to talk no more because that's amazing because I just want people to live in this. Was that true? Was
Yeah,
that
yeah.
and
Okay.
I
Well,
yeah, yeah.
see,
Wow.
the one that Lynnie worked for was one of the original founders of the leading criminal law firm
Mm-hmm.
here
Mm-hmm.
in Bakersfield.
Okay.
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 I don't know if I should say the name of that, but
Maybe
uh,
not because I think that's the mystery of it all.
okay. So Lenny works in the book. He works for Norris Stein, who
Yeah, yeah.
represents the top criminal law attorney in the 50s, 60s, 70s era. He was it. And this person that he's based on, people really did say, if you want to commit murder and get away with it, go see him. for $10,000 you can get away with murder. Of course, I brought that into
Oh,
the book when one of the leading Italian restaurateurs' wives, there's a question about, did she or did her father, who
right,
knocked him off?
right,
And of
right.
course, she started telling her story, and Norris turns to Lynnie and says, I smell gas. Do you? And Lenny said, yeah. And they walked out. So she knew, okay, that line is going to send me to the gas chamber. So
Mm,
she talks to Daddy, and they come back the next day. She has a different story, and all of a sudden, the air is fresh, and
yes.
they can represent her. And here's the 10th thou. Here's the
Wow.
10th thou.
Wow.
Yeah. So that is another mob connection, unproven, but the story
Yeah.
has circulated through the years. So
Boy.
yeah, it's not a boring place to live when you know
No.
what's going on,
No.
but you better watch your P's and Q's and
Yeah. Yeah.
that sort of thing. Yeah, but the Sam Cooke family. His father is Howard Franklin Cooke, and he's a grandson of Frank Cooke.
Mm,
And so Sam is a great grandson of Frank Cooke.
yeah.
So they are passing on characteristics that Frank definitely had. He was altruistic and wanting to protect. Now, this is going to be a community. I've got a Choctaw wife. I've got the Chinese community coming with me. There's Native Americans all around. There are Mexicans, Hispanics. We are going to live together peacefully, even if it takes vigilante justice, because I survived the gold fields and you're not going to ruin my life by not letting me live it. So he has that. By the 20th century and into the 21st, the Cooke family in my book represents the hope, because this
Hmm.
is a community of people with really great values as well as that criminal underbelly
Right.
and their biases, against certain people, like in the real story here in Bakersfield, it was the lords of Bakersfield that had to kind of disperse and get out because if
Mm,
people found out they were gay, they might not
mm,
survive. And there have been a number of murders in
yes.
that regard.
Yeah.
So I brought that in my book. They're more like the queens of Cookesville,
Yeah.
who had to hide and be private, and some of them get out of town. So
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
is a community of good-hearted people, and then those that are, you know, um, maybe not fitting in the way people would like them to fit in, and then there's just the outright bad criminal element. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's all brought out in the book, and
Very much brought out and very well. I mean, you do, and obviously, like history is, I mean, it's you take a snapshot of history in book two, where and you could probably speak better on this, but race relations was going on, not very good. This was a time was when people had maids, people, like the African American population worked in the service industry, right? And
mhm.
I mean, obviously, this is part of history, and you capture that so well, and you bring that. It's almost like there's sections of book two, and you capture it so well, and how you flow from one thought to the next, and point in history. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about the history of book two, where we are as a nation in regards to the historical facts of book two.
Right. Right. Well, the background history does inform what's occurring in Cookesville too. It all matriculates westward. And during World War II, California really uh, transformed from a colonial economy to a modern economy in the concept that for decades, since its founding, there were a lot of riches in California, right? In the gold fields and
Hmm.
oil industry and minerals galore. I mean, Henry Kaiser already had his aluminum, you know, factory going on, but everything was mined and shipped to the East Coast to be finished.
Mm.
Well, the exigencies of World War II meant that we've got to get it done quicker. So the government gave contracts and monetary assistance to all the metals industries and to the military. So on the West Coast, Boeing and all of the airplane and jet industries and the Navy and the shipbuilding industry, all from Seattle all the way to San Diego.
Mm.
And millions of people migrated to California and transformed it into a very modern economy. And that's what I was trying to reflect from Las Vegas to Cookesville, the transformational. And we had a bit of a taste of it during COVID. Everything's shut down. What do you do then? There's nothing's being produced, nothing's being transferred. It's not in 2022. It was still difficult to get a new car from across the ocean.
Yeah.
We had deposits down in 3 different dealerships trying to get a new car, and we
Wow.
couldn't. We finally gave up and bought a 2022 Hyundai Palisade from CarMax, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful car. We love it. But we had a taste of what happened at the end of World War II. Everything had gone to the military effort.
Yeah.
And now you've got a delay in getting, where do we need to build homes? In the West.
Mm.
It's grown millions of people in the West, but we can't build the homes because we can't get the materials.
Yeah.
And there's this lag. So Bugsy Siegel had to pay for that in Las Vegas. He couldn't get the materials. He had to pay top dollar for it in order to take over and finish the Flamingo and open it.
Wow.
In Cookesville, those delays made prices go up. So I'm reflecting what's happened since World War II and then the civil rights unrest, because even though they fought during World War I and they fought during World War II, the African American community came home to know, they were still segregated during both wars and they weren't given respect at home. So finally, the activism starts and every community that's pretty conservative begins to resist. So
Mm.
their housemaid, Clara,
Yeah.
is one of those people who's going to suffer. And
Yeah.
she's not out there being an activist. She's just simply going to clean their house and take
Yeah.
care of their
Going to
kids like
work. Yep.
always.
Yep.
So it's all reflected in what's happening nationally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it does make its way west. So
Yes.
I wanted the national scene to inform the reader that it will impact every community eventually.
Yes.
And and it's going to change the culture of every community. And the people within Cooksville, excuse me, were saying the same thing. Oh, wow, things are happening too rapidly. And again, Lynnie shows both his savvy side and his bias,
Right.
because
Right.
we were aware that he informed that there was a restaurateur that came to Bakersfield from Palm Springs area, opened a lovely Italian restaurant, and he's got all the pictures on the wall, and you just know, okay, look who he knew. He fits right in Bakersfield. Here he is with the Rat Pack, one
Mm.
after another. They're still there. Eureka's was still there.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's Lynnie, the real Lynnie, met with him and said, you know what, your son-in-law, you better be careful because he's the wrong color. You probably don't want, yeah. And so he had an experience of doing that and sharing that with us, which I thought, well, that's really awful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what he thought he was helping this person
Mm.
by saying, you probably, so I mean, it happened in every community.
Yeah.
As you're growing and as you're changing, there are people that resist that change.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
he thought he was helping this restaurateur
Mm.
by suggesting that you probably don't want to have him working here.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's another of the bad side,
Yeah. Yeah.
where he thought he was being helpful. It shows a little bit in the book, but mainly he's very disgusted
Yeah.
in the book.
Yes.
Lynnie is, that someone would abuse Clara, who's hardworking and reliable,
Yeah.
a very good person. And he stresses that. So
Yes.
he had both sides.
Hmm. Absolutely. Um, as you talk and about it, really the Industrial Revolution, right, was happening. And I really like the fact how each book, you do an introduction. And in book two, you mention that. And I don't think people from my generation, they were born after World War II in the 70s and maybe a little bit in the 60s, but they don't really put together that a lot of Americans they were coming back from the war. They had the GI Bill, and that's how they went to college. That's how they got housing, and that's how America was really built. And just listening to that and knowing the fact, I was like, wow. And just to see really the prosperity after World War II come about, but I mean, obviously prosperity came at a price for people, but when you capture and when you put everybody's story together, I don't want to call it a pretty picture. It's a realistic nitty-gritty picture of the way life really is, I think, in that era. So you capture that era. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful the way you brought it out and the way you carried the stories, and you really do feel like they become part of your being, these characters. I'll just
Right,
say that. So
right.
I really like it, Sarah.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
loved writing it, and I love living through a lot of it. That's the truth. The real industrial revolution, of course, happened at the end of the 19th into the beginning of the 20th century, and the American U.S. Industrial revolution lagged behind Germany and England. They were
Mm,
ahead of us.
mm,
But boy, when we started developing, it was rapid, very
yeah.
rapid. So you have a delay, you have a pause in that because of the 1930s depression and then World War II. So that's why during the 1950s people were really reluctant to be complain about anything.
Mm,
Now I have a job and I can put food on the table, and even if I'm being discriminated against somewhat, do I want to stand out and be called a subversive? And that was easy to do in the 50s. It was the McCarthy era.
mm,
Anybody that stood up against the government was accused of being communist. So a lot of Hollywood people lost their jobs just because someone suggested they were slightly pink.
mm,
And then, of course, some politicians fell by the wayside because Nixon and Kennedy both used that. They
mm,
both used accusations, wrong accusations, of being slightly pink or outright communist. And so they rose in their power, building on that wave of McCarthyism. So
understood.
I'm a kid living in Kentucky, and we moved to Orange County in the 60s. So, that was my experience,
Yeah.
knowing that this is wow, we were part of that wave. I look back studying history and realize, oh, yes, the transformation of the West that a leading historian wrote about. We were part of that. My dad came out here to paint. Our neighbors that built onto our house in Kentucky came out here to build houses with Del Webb.
Wow.
Two doors down, he was working for Del Webb. And
Wow.
that's why it occurred to me, I wonder if he was what could have been passing through Las Vegas. And I looked it up. Not only was he passing through, he was managing the building of the Flamingo Hotel. So we're out here after that. So we're the late part of that wave. And we come and uh, get to grow up in this transformational state.
Wow.
That's why I love California. It's
Yeah.
not just why I love California, but
Yeah.
from north to south, you have, you know, different political cultures and social cultures. And then the Central Valley, which is like a melting pot of, oh, yeah, well, you guys go ahead and argue. We're making the money here.
Right,
You
right.
may, you may criticize our dirt and our oil, and you may think this is just a hick town, but we're crying out, we're laughing all the way to the bank. So that
And
was the
it
surprise to me to,
yeah,
see that,
yeah.
yeah, there is this pull. Why do people want to stay here? Because they just get wealthy.
Yeah, yeah,
That's all.
and in a funny way, maybe when people listen to this, go, man, I want to go to Bakersfield. I want to go look at all these because all these places, like all these restaurants and stuff, as we begin to wrap up, all these places are real. These
They are real.
restaurants and the places that you mentioned, obviously the names are probably changed, but they're real places that you see probably every day driving by. And let's not forget the fact that people that have read your book and that are listening to your book are like, oh my God, to read it is one thing, to listen to it and go, oh man, unbelievable. And to know that you're talking about all these places, I almost feel people will be like, hey, when we go visit California, we go to Los Angeles, but let's go to Bakersfield to see all these places. It's like
Well,
Disneyland.
oh yeah, when I first lived here, Merle Haggard's house that he built was still standing on Route 178 that goes into the Curd Canyon. It was famous because he built a pool in the shape of a guitar,
That's
and
cool.
he had a train track running throughout his entire house.
Wow.
Why? Because when they migrated here, they were poor as church mice and they lived in a train car. That was their first home. He, as a kid, with his family, they lived in a boxcar. That
Hmm.
was
Man.
that's how they survived. And so he moved here, and eventually he also Bonnie Owens left, Buck Owens for
Hmm.
Merle Haggard.
Wow.
She left him. I think that Buck was living in Texas at the time, was Texas or Arizona, but they moved here, and his son goes with Bonnie, and so Buck moved here to be closer to his son, and they are the Nashville West characters, Merle
Yeah.
Haggard and Buck
Yeah.
Owens.
Yes, they
And
are.
now we have Buck Owens' Crystal Palace. Both he and Merle have passed on, but it was they had their fame. They kind of put Bakersfield on the map in that
Yep.
regard.
Yep.
And there was all the hee haw group, and
Yeah.
Roy Clark. He was around here a lot. They
Unbelievable.
they were here. I wasn't living here at the time. Came later, but um, it was adding to the fame and fortune. Then, of course, there's a lot of movies that are filmed around this area because of the Wild West look and the hills
Yes.
and the oil wells and the farms and the ranches, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
they live on. And yes, I could go talk to some of the people that are in my book, that are still around.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Sarah, um, again, I'll never not say this when people ask me, but you are a really fantastic writer. You capture, you really are a slice of life writer when it comes to this. And I want everybody to go and discover your book, and not only just your book, but your audiobook, more importantly. Um, so go right now. Links are in the description of this podcast. Um, we'll have your social media links, all that stuff. But the main thing is I want people to go and discover who S.C. Burns is. Because you're hearing the backstory. Now go listen to the story, people. Oh my gosh. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time and talking to us today about your amazing book, Cookesville, USA. Do you want to leave anybody with any thoughts about book two really quick before we wrap up?
Um, wow, it's a ride. It is really a roller coaster ride,
Yeah,
and it's also a trip through California. I mean, Lynnie and his first love.
yeah.
They make a trip to the uh, the Highlands Inn, uh, just south of Monterey. Uh, every even some of the landmarks that they pass, that Stella points out along the road there. One of the statues that they see is my husband Steve's great 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 grandfather. He was the Chinese who came from that area. of the Washington Hotel. He owned it. Steve's great great grandfather. There's a statue to him in the Salinas Valley because he was the biggest landowner. They
Wow.
had a huge ranch. Just every bit of the history, there's some sort of connection. I've been to the Highlands and several times, and it's remarkably beautiful, that area. I lived in San Francisco. This is I've walked the history of this book, and then of course it starts long before I was ever on the scene in Bakersfield or any of California, but I love all of this history because it, it's such a adventure. I think it's just such an adventure and a roller coaster ride with Lynnie. And he's worth getting to know
He
because
very
he's
much is.
got an amazing side.
Yeah.
He's not without heart. He just knows his limitations.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't think anybody would be disappointed in what's happening, where he takes you on this roller coaster ride.
I don't think so. I think again, to love him, to know him is to love him, and to love him, it's like, you either because with love you hate and you love people. So Lenny is that character. So he is that, and I just congratulate you on such a wonderful story. So
I would close with just this one
yes,
end of Peter Friedman's review.
yes,
Although
yes.
California of 1851 might feel like a John Ford movie, while Cookesville of 1961 reads more like Raymond Chandler, altogether it defines an identity that is uniquely American, that we are a land of both scoundrels and heroes, right? And
Yes,
we're not entirely sure which ones deserve our deepest affections. And that is Lenny.
very
When you
much.
read about him, you have affections for him too.
Very much, very
Yeah.
much. I tell you, Sarah, thank you so, so much. I can't wait for our next episode, and where we're talking about book three. And that's a pretty, I don't even want to get into it. It's a pretty heavy book.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
follow them all the way to the end, which is a lot of people have said to me, I didn't want it to end.
Yes, and I every time I talk to you, I'm probably that extra person every time, and you don't want it to end, but my gosh, we'll be talking about that in the next episode. So everybody, thank you again, thank you for listening. Please go discover Sarah's books. All the links are in the description, and thank you, Sarah, for letting us be a part of your world with your audiobook and everything helping you put together. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have to plug you as well because the sound effects in this book are amazing. They will make you feel like you are living through these people. Yeah, you are definitely bringing it to life. It sets the mood for every part of the book. So thank you for doing an amazing production job.
Well, I appreciate that and thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, we will see you in our next episode. Go get the book, go get the audiobook. Have a good, have a good day, have a good night, wherever you're listening to this. Thank you. Bye.